Morning Wildcats, it's Miss Graves. I'm here to summarize pages 197 to 226 in our wonderful book series, Unwind. At the beginning of this chapter, Connor is in the airplane hangar and he thinks he sees someone familiar. It turns out it's Lev. He runs towards Lev, and you kind of think he's charging at him, but then he regains control. He's thrilled and furious at the same time. Lev looks like a totally new kid. He's really gone through a lot of life-changing events, and it shows. Lev sees him, grins, and says, "How are things?" Connor does two things. First, punches him in the eye and says, "That's for everything that you did to us," and then hugs him tightly and says, "I'm really, really glad that you're alive." He takes him to the medical tent because he punched him in the eye and it's bruising already. And we're assuming that Rissa sees him there at the medical tent. Lev in the middle of the night then wakes him up and kind of like a little sneak attack. And he says, "Don't ever hit me again. You'll regret it." And then Connor doesn't really like being backed into a corner and says, "You know what? I'll hit you again if you deserve it." And he says, "Just make sure that I deserve it." We see a lot more from the Admiral. He calls for Connor and asks him to fix a coffee maker. And I mean, it's all fake. The coffee maker wasn't even plugged in. So he really just wanted to see Connor. Connor picks up on this. And he says, "Hey, your name comes up a lot for two reasons. All the repairs that you make, because he's a mechanic, and all the fighting." This is about the time when Connor realizes that the coffee maker isn't broken. And he says, why am I here?" And the Admiral confronts him and just says, "You don't like me." And Connor says, "No, I don't like you." Then they start talking about the rumors that Roland is starting. And they're confronting the fact that Roland is sort of in a power struggle with them and the whole group. The Admiral takes him to a jet where the 5 kids suffocated in a crate. And this is the second or third time I'm reading through the book, and now I'm like really suspicious just because I thought the kids were put into the crate 4 at a time. So the fact that there were 5 kids in this crate, I don't know if they just ran out of other crates and so they shoved an extra kid in there and that's why they suffocated. But he takes him to the hangar and it's the exact same plane in the exact same crate where the first original 5 were suffocated. And what Connor discovers is the Goldens. All 5 of the Goldens, the ones that do the intake where they interview everybody to find out their job. Those 5 Goldens are dead. Okay, suffocated in the exact same way that the other 5 kids suffocated. There's no signs of blood, and the Admiral tells them that these kids disappeared the night before, and this is where he found them. And then he reminds Connor, whoever took out these 5 kids, these are the 5 most powerful kids in this area. They didn't do it on accident. They did it as a power struggle. So we know who's in charge of that. We know who's responsible for killing those 5 kids, or we think we know, and it's Roland. He tells Connor he needs a new set of eyes and ears out there. And so Connor says, "So basically you want me to spy." He doesn't really like that. But then the Admiral starts to confide in him about his role in the Heartland War because, he's an admiral and he's gone to war. Okay, so the Admiral and Connor talked about the Admiral's role in the Heartland War, and he was there when the whole idea of unwinding was put into play. And he thought that once he presented the idea, everyone would realize how crazy and ridiculous it was, and they wouldn't do it. Unfortunately, everybody thought it was a great idea. Then at the top of 225, they start to address all the rumors that the Admiral is taking all their body parts, okay, because he's got these teeth and they look a little weird, and he starts talking about his son, Harlan. And now we learn the Admiral's motivation for doing what he's doing. He confesses that his son Harlan was a troubled kid, and then you start to put the pieces together and go, oh my gosh. So because he was one of the people who presented this crazy idea of unwinding, he was like the godfather of it, everybody expected him to lead by example. And he thought he had time after he agreed to have his son unwind to go back and undo it. But they fast-tracked it, and before you know it, his son was unwound. Now, he doesn't have the teeth of his son, but his dentist used the mold of his son's teeth to create dentures for himself. And so his smile sort of looks like him and sort of doesn't. It never occurred to Connor to consider the toll of unwinding and what it had on the parents who signed the order, but he starts to see where the Admiral is coming from. And at the very end of chapter 34, he says, "Bit by bit, I'm making things right, Connor." The Admiral says, "Bit by bit, and in more ways than one." And so I'm starting to think, okay, bit by bit, you mean like piece by piece that was taken apart from his son and used elsewhere? So, I mean, normally when you say bit by bit, you mean step by step you're doing something. Anyway, the whole basic part is that the Admiral picks up on Connor's leadership role and the fact that everybody really wants to follow Connor. Connor just wants to disappear and not be noticed, but every time he does something, people notice it. And Roland's noticing that too. But the end of chapter 34, there were lots of major, oh my gosh, moments. The author really built up the suspense before he revealed the Admiral's reasoning for why he's trying to save Unwinds. And that leaves us on page 226 with chapter 35 and Lev. Lev's changed quite a bit, so it'll be interesting to see where he goes from here. Enjoy your reading. Happy Thanksgiving.